Happy Thanksgiving, everyone. Well, I was going to say from everyone here at TwinTakes Football, but it is literally just me. So happy Thanksgiving from me. Even though the holiday is approaching, we're going to get this video out early, one day early, so you can watch it either tonight or tomorrow morning before the slate of games kicks off. If you missed the first 3 games on Thursday, no worries. We'll still have tons of content to go over. We have a full slate of games for week 12. Absolutely no bye weeks, so a ton of information to cover as we get you prepped for the stretch run. So as always, we'll go over the games here. Matchup I'm looking forward to. Hit on at least most of the games that I find relevant, highlight or one specific matchup of the week, talk about the guys I'm going to highlight in Sleeper, direct you over there for some more dedicated player projection analysis. So as we continue to grow in conjunction with Sleeper, we're doing great things over there, have so many updates to share with you. Please like the video, subscribe as well, probably over there as well. And I'll see you after this lovely intro I made. Welcome back in, everyone, to TwinTakes Fantasy Football. And once again, I will say happy Thanksgiving. I hope you guys are enjoying the break from work, all the extra football, all the extra food. However your family loves to celebrate it, just find some time to relax, enjoy, and sit down and, we're here for football. So find a way to watch some of the games. I really do love the slate of games that the NFL has lined up for us this week. I mean, I'm going to talk in depth about every single game that does happen on Thursday at some point this matchup, just because I think we have 3 really, really exciting games. I can't remember a slate of games on Thanksgiving Day that was this exciting. So very, very excited to dive into that, talk about some of the players I'm looking forward to, some trends, some updates. This been a crazy week for news. We'll definitely touch on the New York Jets news. We'll talk on some of the RB drop situations as well. So with that being said, let's stop dilly-dallying. Let's jump into our first matchup that I'm going to look forward to. And how else? We'll kick it off the same way the NFL is kicking off right here at 11:30 Central Time, where I am, with Bills at the Lions. First game on Thanksgiving Day. Buffalo is currently favored by 9.5 points, with the highest over/under on this week by far and away. And I think this might be the highest over/under on the year so far, with 54 points. This leaves Buffalo with a projected point total of 31.5. Detroit's projected for 22.5 points going in. So, again, what better way to kick it off than with none other than the 2 of the biggest offensive juggernauts in the NFL. And I want to talk about Detroit here for a little bit, because I know they get a bad rap, but especially the defense of Detroit, but they've actually been playing some pretty inspiring defense as of recently, holding up really well against the Packers, holding them to 9 points. I know they let up 30 against the Bears and Justin Fields, but they had some pretty good plays. They actually graded out pretty well over that. And then obviously they shut down Saquon and Giants last week. This is a defense that is night and day difference from the start of this season. Rookie Aiden Hutchinson is playing amazing. He had that unbelievable interception last week against the Giants. His play is completely revitalized, cementing his number 2 overall draft status and his value being a top pick in the draft. So very, very cool to see that kind of revolutionize under Dan Campbell. On the other side of the ball, we finally got confirmation that Jameson Williams is back at practice. And no, he's not going to get in the field this week. I know that for a fact, but I am just so excited. We've gone on and on. We've talked many games here, especially many deep dives about how the Detroit runs its offense and how they don't really rely on the quarterback position, but they use a ton of their offensive skill position players to really expand this offense. And I'm so excited to see Jameson Williams, who was the top wide receiver prospect in this class before succumbing to that ACL injury in the national championship game. Really excited to see what he can do, what dimension he can add to this offense. And I mean, I think he truly is a special player. So this is going to be very, very fun if they can get him incorporated here in the waning weeks of this fantasy season. And then also we just have to accept now, it's been a large enough sample size. We got to accept Jamal Williams is the number 1 running back in this offense. Okay. DeAndre Swift, as much as we loved him coming in the season, as much hype as he has, as talented as he is, I think he's more of a pass catching back. He's going to fill that more, honestly, he's more similar to a Rondale Moore than a Aaron Jones, in my opinion, right now. I think he lines up more in the slot. He'll line up more for pass catching backs. It's really going to be Jamal Williams as the power primary back to rush between the tackles going forward. So apologies for everyone who has that. It's going to be a frustrating experience, but whoever picked up Jamal Williams off waivers, you're going to have a very delightful time come the rest of this season. For the Bills, we did see them stagnate a little bit against the Browns last week, and they relied very heavily on the run and Devin Singletary. Now, is this a question of a lingering issue with Josh Allen's elbow? Someone who's very familiar with UCL injuries, it's not a quick injury. It's something that goes on for quite a while, and I personally predict that's going to be something he's going to struggle with for the rest of the season. He'll never be 100% again, at least for 2022, but they're not going to come out and say that, so maybe that's something going on behind the scenes. Only we can speculate here, or was it just against this absolute horrible defense in the Browns, and they just felt like they didn't really need to put it in Josh Allen's hands to win. They would rather get the ball out of his hands, give himself a little bit of a breather, give him a little bit less responsibility, and they didn't need to go all out to beat the Browns. We don't really know which one it is, but hopefully it is the latter rather than the former. And we all know that the Bills have one of the best, if not the best, wide receiving trios or wide receiving pass catchers in the NFL with Davis, Knox, and Diggs. And obviously, it is great for fantasy when they let Josh Allen just let the ball rip, sling these ball over the field. But again, it's hard for Josh Allen to drop back and throw 40 passes a game. It takes quite a toll on his arm. Even if he didn't have that elbow injury, that's quite tiring to do that over and over and over again. And especially when it gets into, the kind of doldrums of the season, probably giving him a bit of a respite, relying a little more on the run game, taking some mental responsibility and some of that mental exhaustion away from him, thinking about throwing a ball probably is going to pay off dividends when it comes to playoff time. So again, we'll see if they lean into Devin Singletary, but given the way they shut down Saquon last week with the Lions, they may need to utilize these pass catchers to the fullest, which again is fantastic for fantasy. So it'll be interesting to see which Detroit defense shows up this week and how the Bills take care of that. So again, we'll break it down in our tiers. Our must-start tier is going to be Allen, Diggs, Gabe Davis, got to start him here, Dawson Knox, Devin Singletary from the Bills side. Basically, most of those guys are all starts. Most of those starters from the Bills side. It's going to be interesting when it comes to Detroit. Jamal Williams, obviously must start. We talked about him being the RB1 in this offense. Amon-Ra St. Brown, he looks to be 100% healthy now, and I'm definitely starting him. That's where I cut the cord. There's a very notable name missing here, and that's DeAndre Swift. Now we go down to our probably start section, and we can find Jared Goff and DeAndre Swift here in our probably start section. That's just because DeAndre Swift does not have that touchdown upside. He's getting less touches at the running back spot than Jamal Williams. So if you have other options, I would not be opposed to starting, David Montgomery over DeAndre Swift, or again, I would start Jamal Williams over DeAndre Swift. If you have one flex spot and you have both those guys, I would personally start Jamal Williams over DeAndre Swift. That's just how I see these guys lining up for this week. A guy like a James Conner is going to go in my lineup ahead of DeAndre Swift. And then in the desperation category, we have one name. It's going to be James Cook. We've seen him getting more and more involved in this offense. Nyheim Hines hasn't really come over and been involved since the trade with the Colts. But James Cook, we saw him go for quite a few good runs there at the end of the Browns game last week. He broke off 3 big runs in a row. Maybe he's getting more comfortable in this NFL-style offense. If this game does get out of hand quickly and they get up by double-digit points going into the fourth quarter, look for James Cook to step in, and he could definitely get some work in with Devin Singletary there. So only in a desperation. So that's going to wrap up the first game. The second game, we're going to jump to that night on Thanksgiving. Hopefully you guys stay awake after all the turkey and stuffing that most people will consume. It's going to jump to talking about the Packers at the Eagles. Currently, Philadelphia is favored by 7 points. They have an over-under currently of 46.5 points. That leads the projected point total for the Eagles of 27 points, and Green Bay is going to be 19.5 points, not even 20 points. Why are we highlighting a team that's not going to score 20 points? Well, let me tell you why. Let's just start off by saying these are 2 of the oldest and most storied franchises in the NFL, and I can't overlook how special it is from the history and legacy aspect of the NFL. But turning our focus to this season, these are 2 teams that could provide a sneaky good matchup. Obviously, that's why I'm highlighting it here. The Packers are finding a stud wide receiver in rookie Christian Watson, and his touchdown, he's had 5 touchdowns over the past 2 games. Maybe they're finally bringing in an offensive weapon for Aaron Rodgers. I do want to say it's kind of BS to me about, they're not going to draft a first-round wide receiver. Well, if they drafted If they drafted Christian Watson in the first round at 28th instead of Devontae Wyatt, would that have changed anything? And instead of trading up and taking him in the top of the second round, Christian Watson's basically a first-round wide receiver. I don't want to hear the whole, they haven't drafted a first-round wide receiver since 2002 because they basically got their first-round wide receiver in the second round. It literally doesn't matter. I'm so tired of hearing that argument because whether they took him in the 28th spot or the 36th spot where they did take him does not matter to me. Doesn't matter at all. So can we stop that, guys? I don't want to hear about not taking first round talent because that's what they did with Christian Watson. And he's hopefully coming into his own, but we cannot ignore the fact that when the Packers have found success, Christian Watson 2 touchdowns last week, but they still lost. When they have success, it's when they run the ball early, it's when they run the ball often, and when they run the ball efficiently. Currently, Eagles are giving up the most EPA per play to the running back position. So especially while they have a Jordan Davis-sized hole in the middle of that front four. They've signed Ndamukong Suh. They have signed Linval Joseph, but they're not going to make up for the size, speed, and athletic freak that Jordan Davis is. So Aaron Jones really needs to take advantage of this in order for the Packers to even keep this game remotely close. On the other side of it, the Eagles need to really find their identity. They've had a midseason lull. They had a terrible loss to Commanders 2 weeks ago, and they almost got beat out by the Colts last week. And I don't know what they need to do to right this ship, whether it's going to be fully committing to the run game again, or if they can restate this explosive pass offense and figure out a way to do it without Goddard. They need to find some way to overcome these injuries and push through kind of this, like I said, the dog days of the season, the doldrums of the season where things kind of start mounting. This is, again, a team we talked about. They had so much success through the first 8 games because they managed to start 17 starters on both sides of the ball through 8 games, and that was by far and away the healthiest roster through 8 games. But now they lost Jordan Davis. They lost Dallas Goedert. A.J. Brown's a little banged up, so they'll have to find a way to, if Nick Sirianni's worth his salt, he'll have to find a way to overcome those injuries. And I want to make a point about last week's game. Yeah, it was promising that, yes, they won. First and foremost, they won. They pulled it out, and they put the ball in Jalen's hands at the end of the game, and he led a game-winning drive, and that's really what you want to see from a QB. You want to see him take responsibility. You want to see him hold accountability. Zach Wilson. You want to see if he can battle through diversity, but that was the Colts we're talking about. This is not a team in the Colts that inspires a ton of confidence, and they should have handled that game from start to finish. And I would rather they demonstrate their ability to handle diversity and lead a game-winning drive and put the trust and the ball in Jalen's hands against a team that hasn't fired their coach midseason and hired a coach with 0 head coaching experience in the NFL. The Green Bay Packers, while having a disappointing season, are still a very highly thought of club, and they can certainly reestablish their legitimacy at the top of the pecking order of the NFL if they can give a convincing win over the Packers on Thanksgiving night. So obviously we're talking about our must starts. Jalen Hurts, Miles Sanders. This is a Green Bay defense, a running defense it's ranked 28th in the league and 28th in points given up to the running back position. So Miles Sanders is a must start after a couple disappointing weeks. Without Dallas Goedert, Devonta Smith, and A.J. Brown both have to find their way into your lineup. They will both be heavily targeted through this game. Especially Devonta Smith is really intriguing, as I think Jair is going to line up primarily on the boundary against A.J. Brown, which leaves Devonta Smith to kind of torch some of these less active guys in the secondary for Green Bay, especially with Eric Stokes missing significant amounts of time. On the Green Bay side, the only 2 must-starts that really make it here are Aaron Jones and Christian Watson. Again, the touchdown upset for Christian Watson currently is insane, and we talked about how important it is for the Green Bay Packers to establish the run, especially against a team that's pretty bad against the run per EPA metrics. In the probably start, we're just going to take a few more mid-tier players from the Packers. We're looking at a Aaron Rodgers, a Robert Tonyan, and then an Allen Lazard. Some guys that, they have that touchdown upside. They have the ability to go for 4 or 5 receptions. They're not going to win you a week. They're not going to get you 20 points, but they can definitely get you into that double-digit point tier, lower tier flex worthy players. And then in the desperation start, if you're really struggling, I wouldn't recommend starting AJ Dillon, but again, we talked about the EPA metric for the Eagles. You can definitely start AJ Dillon if you are absolutely if you're in a 20 team league, then maybe that's where I go with it. So last game that I really want to highlight here in this section is going to be Chargers at the Cardinals. Chargers currently favored by 4.5 points. Over-under is sitting at 47.5 with projected points for the Los Angeles Chargers being at 26.5, and Arizona is currently at 22. Now, this is an injury bowl. Not a lot of people are going to talk about this game just because of how many aspects or how many pieces of these 2 teams are just sidelined with injury, and people may think, okay, that's why there's such a low over-under total. That's why we should be avoiding this game. We don't know what's going to happen, and let's just rattle off some of the injuries that they're currently dealing with or have dealt with recently. Hollywood Brown, Rondale Moore, Zach Ertz, Kyler Murray, Keenan Allen, Mike Williams, Jalen Guyton, Gerald Everett, Justin Herbert, and we'll just throw J.C. Jackson in there for fun, even on the defensive side of the ball. However, despite all the injuries and questions surrounding these teams, this is still a matchup that I think could, where both offenses absolutely blow up and deliver you a ton of fantasy points this week. Herbert continues to get healthier and healthier, and we've heard from Brandon Staley that he is truly close to 100% from that rib cartilage injury earlier in the season, and Keenan Allen is back, and there's going to be knocking on wood because I don't want him to re-aggravate anything, but he looked really, really good last week. He said he wasn't going to back to 100%. He did look 100%, went for almost 100 yards on 5 receptions, and that was on a limited snap count. So as his snap count dissipates this week, and even with Mike Williams re-aggravating his ankle, Herbert will have 2 bona fide studs in Josh Palmer and Keenan Allen to throw to and really open up this passing offense. They should absolutely torch the 29th ranked pass defense of the Cardinals, and Eckler's just going to put an absolute work against the 30th ranked run defense for the Arizona Cardinals as well. On the Cardinals side, the wide receivers are all over the place, but there's real stability at the running back position. James Conner, he came back from injury 3 weeks ago, and he's put up 3 pretty solid performances in a row. He's been very dominant in coming back from injury, and these Chargers are 27th against the run, so Conner will absolutely shoulder the bulk of his offensive load, especially with Rondale being questionable, with Hollywood still being questionable. And so he put up actually a really solid fantasy performance against the number 1 rushing defense last week in the San Francisco 49ers. Imagine what he can do against a 27th ranked run defense here. Also, with a lot of those wide receivers out, and the second best wide receiver potentially being Greg Dortch, he could also make up some of the work for the lack of wide receivers with pass catching work through the air. So James Conner does actually sneak his way into a top 10 running back for me on the week for week 12. Rondale is questionable. We talked about this. Hollywood may not come back. He may come back. There's a mixed reports coming out of camp, but I'm not really worried about either of them because DeAndre Hopkins does heal all wounds. We've talked about this a couple weeks ago. We talked about it multiple weeks in a row, actually, that he is a top 5 wide receiver in the NFL, and his impact on this team is just indescribable. He comes in, not only is he super talented, he has a calming effect on Kyler Murray, he has a calming effect on Cliff Kingsbury. He seems to just be a leader of this team, leads the team in ways that seems irreplicable by Kyler or Cliff or anyone in this offense. He seems to just bring the team together in ways that, can't not be fathomed. So his impact on this team is just super special, and I'm futzing over my words because his impact just honestly cannot be described by words. It transcends beyond words, the special ability that he has on a football team. So I'm going to stop, glorifying DeAndre Hopkins and move on to our must-start section where we find, first and foremost, DeAndre Hopkins, but also I want you to start Justin Herbert. We talked about how he's going to torch this defense, especially with Joshua Palmer and Keenan Allen. Speaking of D-Hop and Keenan Allen and Josh Palmer do also find their way into the must-start category. On the other side, Kyler was confirmed as starting for week 12, so he is a must-start. Austin Eckler and James Conner, both starting running backs, are absolute smash plays this week, but, that was never a question. In the probably start, we'll just find guys that we need to figure out if they are healthy. So is Hollywood healthy? Sure, I'll start him. Is Rondale healthy? Yeah, I'll probably start him as well. And then desperation start, we're not going to try to dig any deeper. You could probably go for Greg Dortch. I understand that he does have the ability to go off like he did for over 100 yards last week in the absence of Hollywood and Rondale Moore, but that is a true desperation. It's Greg Dortch. So that's going to be the matchups I want to highlight here and the ones I'm looking forward to. Let's jump into our quick hits and best of the rest. And we'll start out with Patriots at Vikings, where Minnesota's currently favored at 2.5. This one is really, how did the Vikings bounce back from their crushing defeat by the Cowboys last week? Was it a fluke? Is the Kirk Cousins and Kevin O'Connell honeymoon over? Is the turf toe injury that Justin Jefferson sustained more serious than we thought? And it wasn't just a lack of inefficiency by Kirk Cousins and just a complete wreckage by the Cowboys defensive line, but Justin Jefferson is seriously hurt and is impacting his ability on the field. Hopefully that is not the case, but I want to see some life from Cook, Jefferson, and Cousins against the Patriots defense that, it's not half bad. So if they can put up work against here and pull out another win, I won't be too down on the Vikings. And then for the Patriots, just start Ramondre. Don't complicate this. Don't try to go for any receivers. It's not worth your time or effort or your sanity. Bengals at Titans. We're currently Cincinnati's favored by 1.5 points. I would actually tend to lean the under in this matchup. That's why I didn't want to highlight it. I don't think there's going to be a lot of fantasy points to go around. These are two very sneaky good defenses. So I think they're going to limit each other a lot, especially in the run game. Titans are great against the run, and we know there's a good likelihood that Mixon is not going to be ready to be back on the field and still in concussion protocol by the time he takes the field Sunday. There's obviously a downgrade from Mixon to Samaje Perine, and obviously an insane downgrade if Titans run defense is out there blocking up that running lanes. T. Higgins, though, that man may continue to light up secondaries. Jamar Chase, right now, there's currently reports that he will play this week. It still seems just insanely early from that hip injury for Jamar Chase to come back. And literally the only excuse they said he's come back early is because he's built different. That's not a good enough reason. I am personally a man of science. That's not enough to convince me. I'm personally still believing that if Jamar Chase is back, he will be on a very, very limited snap count. And honestly, it's very, very likely he will re-aggravate that injury. So T. Higgins is still the man. Is going to be lighting up the secondary. Still a guy that I have tremendous confidence in being a top 10 wide receiver on the week. I would love to see a more consistent game from Traylon this week. Again, he had a great start to the week, a great start to his midseason career, a great breakout game last week against the Packers, but I do want to see him come in and put up consistent points, consistently be the target lead in that offense. But I wouldn't mess around with Robert Woods or any other Titans pass catcher. Westbrook-Ikhine is too inconsistent. Austin Hooper, I don't want to rely on a tight end there. You have a full regimen of tight ends to choose from. You can do better than Austin Hooper. And Tyler Boyd, dude, I have cared for this man on this channel, on Sleeper for 2 weeks, where I'm getting a lot more reach, and he's just hurt me way too many times for me to recommend him here. Like, he's probably gonna go off this week just because I recommend not starting him. But 2 back-to-back like 5-point weeks, not for me, man. I'm trying to win here. Next game will be Texans at the Dolphins with Miami currently favored by almost 2 touchdowns, 13 points here. Second highest line of the week. Very surprising. There's a line higher than this, but we'll get to it a little bit later. Dameon Pierce is obviously a great play here, despite the bad week last week. He still goes against a pretty bad run defense that Miami Dolphins have, and Dameon Pierce is still incredibly talented, so I do love him, but I'm not going to play anyone else from the Texans. But on the other side, though, we do love a bad defense for fantasy, and Texans are by far the worst defense in the league, period. Pass, quarterback, rush defense, they're the worst. By far and away the worst. But there's such a thing as too bad for fantasy. Like, this game could get out of hand very, very early. Texans are currently ranked 4th in fantasy points given to wide receiver, not because of Derek Stingley, not because they are good at fantasy. It's because no one needs to actually throw the ball. It's because they're already winning by 28 points in the second quarter, and they're just like, okay, let's just run the ball and get this freaking game over with. You'll see their players might get pulled after the third quarter, like the way all the Vikings and Cowboys players were last week in that blowout. So it's just like very frustrating from that standpoint. And I get it. Waddle, Tyreek, they're both top 5 fantasy wide receivers, and you still got to play them, but their upside is capped because of the whole, they don't need to throw the ball. They're just going to rush the ball with Tua. They're going to rush the ball with Jeff Wilson or Raheem Mostert and just eviscerate Houston on the ground. There's not really a need to really attack them through the air. And they'll probably get pulled before the end of the game, if we're being honest here. Jeff Wilson, though, I have full confidence that he is the RB1 for Miami. It's not Raheem Mostert. I think the snap share and the touch share, opportunity share will all go to Jeff Wilson. So he will win people a lot of weeks this week. He's a smash play. Next, Bears at the Jets, where Jets are currently favored by 4.5 points. And the only thing I really care about from this game, what is Justin Fields' health? What is the severity? How quickly can he bounce back from it? Can he play through it effectively? I think the report that came out earlier is that he had a separated shoulder in his non-throwing shoulder, which actually seems pretty severe. I think it was like separated and dislocated. That does not seem like a minor injury to me. Will it affect his confidence rushing the ball? aka the thing that made him so special for fantasy. Obviously, if you are injured, you're going to be more cautious of your shoulder and less likely to take risks, which is why he was so good rushing the ball. Was he was going out and making these tremendous plays and escaping tackles. Is going to be a little bit more timid behind the offensive line. Unfortunately, I think he will be. I don't know if I have the confidence to continue to play him in his hot hand this week after that vicious injury, but I'll be watching very closely because I need answers. I lied. There's one more thing I want to see from the Jets. It's the fact that Zach Wilson got benched. Garrett Wilson and Elijah Moore, I think, they're lucky stars for this because literally the best thing for the Jets would be if Salah puts Flacco in a QB. Currently, it is reported that Flacco will be sitting on the bench and Mike White will be the starting QB. I think Flacco gives him a better shot to win, so I don't know what Salah's doing there. But, either way, boost to Garrett Wilson for that. He finds a way back into the lineup for this week. And obviously, as from the running back position, it's Michael Carter. He's by far and away the most snap share. He's the only running back over 50% snap share. Both Ty Johnson and James Robinson are both under 30%. So yeah, Michael Carter, lean into the rushing game. He should be okay for fantasy this week. Next game, we're going to touch on Falcons at Commanders, where Washington's currently favored by 4 points. Antonio Gibson averages over 28 points, fantasy points the week of Thanksgiving. This man is just a holiday machine. He must love turkey, must fuel him. So also, this is a Falcons defense that has been last in NFL running backs in the past 4 matchups, producing top 5 running backs at the position each of the last 4 weeks. We're talking about we're talking about Donta Foreman, a bunch of those guys. So both Gibson and Robinson are in my lineup this week. Unfortunately, Kyle Pitts is out for the rest of the season with the torn MCL, or maybe that is fortunate for the Kyle Pitts managers who are struggling with the sit decision every week and how bad he was for fantasy. So maybe this kind of helps you just move on to a different tight end. But maybe, just maybe, this helps Drake London a little bit. He's been finding the end zone in the past couple of weeks. Maybe he gets a few more passes thrown his way, a few more targets, a few more end zone targets. Maybe gets a 2-touchdown game, God forbid. So maybe, just maybe, Drake will be back to relevance for the time and the playoffs, as the Falcons are still contending for a playoff spot. So could be interesting to see Drake London be a week winner the same way Amon-Ra was, or a league winner the same way Amon-Ra was last year. Fingers crossed, because I have had so much stock in Drake, and I made so many bold predictions about Drake London. He's my guy. And we'll talk about who I think is the actual best rookie wide receiver so far this year. I will divulge that information later, but I'm still a huge Drake London fanboy. Ravens at Jaguars, where Baltimore is currently favored by 4, and this has to be a get right game for the Ravens. Not the Jaguars, the Ravens. This offense has looked miserable in the past few weeks, and Lamar has been absolutely mediocre for fantasy since he lost a bunch of weapons in the passing game. I'm sticking my flag in the ground here. This will be Lamar's bounce back game. He will get over 25 fantasy points. And Harbaugh and the coaching brass in Baltimore will get this team cooking and figure out how to get them offensively working again. On the other side, Christian Kirk will absolutely cook this Thanksgiving against the 25th ranked pass defense for the Ravens. Obviously, has to do with Kyle Hamilton struggling as a rookie, which is not unheard of. Very, very common for a rookie DB to struggle. Marcus Williams, who is their big free agent signing, is currently on IR. And Marcus Peters has just regressed in general. I mean, Marlon Humphrey's good, but with the other key pieces going around, thankfully they did hold on to Chuck Clark, who's been having a good season, but overall they've been pretty bad against the pass. Raiders at Seahawks. Seahawks is they're only favored by 3.5 points right now. Like, what is going on? First off, I want to talk about how I missed my beloved Geno Smith and Kenneth Walker on their bye weeks. I was very much in on Geno and Kenneth since week 1. So they have been absolutely putting in work for me in fantasy, and it was devastating not to have them last week. So very happy they're back along with DK and Lockett. I am not a Seattle fan by any stretch of the means. Still, that's not my team that I support, but this team is just so damn fun to watch. And this line is very disrespectful to the Seahawks right now. I'm expecting the Seahawks to absolutely blow the Raiders out of the water, smash them by double-digit points. I'll put a tick down for 9.5 point spread. I think the Seahawks will absolutely cover that. And all 4 of those guys I mentioned for the Seahawks are going to feast this week in fantasy. Rams at Chiefs. This is the highest line this week at 14.5. And I don't think this is an exaggeration. I think this is actually a pretty accurately set line. So the Rams, they cut Darrell Henderson, their best running back in the season so far. Makes sense. So right now their offense consists of a washed-up Allen Robinson, Tyler Higbee, and a rookie Kyron Williams. Sounds like a winning combination. Not. Also, they lost yet another offensive lineman this past week, so we really only have one, according to PFF, one starting caliber offensive lineman in Robert Haverstein. Everything else would not be considered a starter by any metrics when it comes to the offensive line. So this is going to be absolutely abysmal, as we just get news right now that Matt Stafford's going to be out for week 12. So Bryce Ripien, Jesus, that poor man this week. Maybe it is time to put a fork in them for the fantasy prospects and for the NFL prospects. Time for them to shut down and rebuild. As the Chief wide receiver room gets increasingly thinner, our Lord and Savior at tight end, Travis Kelce, only becomes more and more of a god amongst men at that position, and a differentiator for a ton of teams that have him. And Isaiah Pacheco had the first 100-yard rushing game in over a season for the Chiefs. So does he become a league-winning running back this year? I believe so. Last one in our quick hit section, Saints at 49ers. Saints is currently favored by 9 points, and the concern here is primarily for Kamara. He didn't have a great game last week, and this week he faces the number 1 rushing defense in terms of yards allowed, as well as fantasy points given up to the running backs. I'm going to fade him as he tries and fails more often than not to carry this entire offense. They put a lot of work on his shoulder, and with Andy Dalton back there, without Michael Thomas, with a very beat up Jarvis Landry, it's just he is struggling to carry the bulk of this offensive workload. But let Olave keep cooking. At this point in the season, he is the best wide receiver. Olave, if we had to redo dynasty startup drafts right now, Olave is probably going 2nd, 3rd, 4th overall. Maybe Breece Hall. Honestly, Kenneth Walker's probably the 101 at this point. Breece Hall, we might make an argument that he goes 2nd, but with the ACL injury, and the fact that he won't be back for another year and a half or so, maybe Chris Olave goes number 2, but he looks so damn good. On another line, what can I say other than the 49ers just are absolutely insane? Start all of them. Just start them all. They'll get you points. They're going to steamroll the Saints team, and this is a terrifying team heading into the end of the season. They're absolutely hitting their peak and hitting their stride at the right time for both fantasy and for the NFL and the playoffs there. So we're now going to wrap that section up, and let's talk about our matchup of the week. Let's hit it.
Ladies and gentlemen, let's get ready to rumble!
All right, matchup of the week, Giants at Cowboys, where Dallas is currently favored by 9.5. A little disrespectful for the Giants, don't you think, given they both have a 7-3 record. The overall under is currently set at 45.5 points, so the projected points right now is Dallas at 27 and the Giants at 18.5. All right, 3 things essential for Thanksgiving: turkey, family drama, and Cowboys football, and we are treated to an especially juicy matchup for this iteration of Cowboys football with an NFC East divisional rival matchup. As we saw a couple weeks ago with Eagles versus Commanders, you just throw everything and anything out of the window when it comes to the NFC East. You never know what's going to happen, but what makes this game extra spicy is that both the Giants and the Cowboys enter the game with 7-3 records, combining for 14 wins, one of the highest win totals when it comes to a Thanksgiving matchup in recent years. And right now, they're both projected to make the playoffs, so they're both going to be wild cards right now. I believe Cowboys are 5th, Giants are 6th per the current rankings, but they're not going to catch the Eagles, I don't think. So this is going to be a very, very important game when it comes down for playoff seeding, whether they finish in that 5, 6, or 7 spot, or maybe even with a surging 49ers team and with the Falcons, if they get lucky down the stretch, maybe one of them misses, and maybe this is the game that kind of figures out which one makes the playoffs and which one's going to miss the playoffs and be at home watching from the couch this year. So this is a crucial game for seeding, for making the playoffs, for January when that comes. So these are 2 teams also it's kind of a tale of 2 different trajectories, where the Cowboys, they're coming off their best game in years. Since I live in Dallas, I've been watching them for quite a while. This is the most impressive win I've seen them have in such a long time. They've seemed to figure out an offense, and they can dice you up in so many different ways and beat you no matter what you prepare for. They can power through you with Zeke. They can finesse you with Pollard. They can go over the top with CD, or they can chip away at you with Dalton Schultz. And this defense, they're pretty good and accomplished just the small feat of shutting down a top 5 offense in the Minnesota Vikings last week. Not only shut them down, they shut them out nearly, with only 3 points put up on the board. Michael Parsons is probably gunning for Defensive Player of the Year, and he's basically a lock for Defensive Player of the Year at this point. He is just so freaking talented. On the other side, the Giants are finally given a taste of their own medicine last week, being ousted by an underdog, and they've been facing media scrutiny all year, being labeled as overperforming, overrated, not really deserving of their 7-3 record. Unlike the famous quote from Tony Dungy, many contend that they are not what their record says they are, and the game last week did nothing to quiet the media frenzy. But even if they keep it close in this game, obviously they don't want to get blown out. If they lose by a field goal, keep it close, that may be enough to establish their legitimacy as a top team in the NFC. But unfortunately, their skill position room continues to take a hit as Wandale's season is now over with a torn ACL. Sterling Shepard was out earlier this season. Kenny Golladay is basically useless, and Daniel Bellinger is still out. So right now they have literally Darius Slayton, and that's really about it. Richie James, I guess, is another name you could throw in there. So Daniel Jones is going to have to step it up big time. And even though Saquon currently, in my opinion, for my salt, is the best running back in the league currently, he cannot do it all by himself, especially against this Cowboys team that is pretty damn good. So For must-starts, we're talking about Dak, we're talking about CD, Pollard, Zeke, and Schultz. A lot of those guys we mentioned in the way that that the Cowboys love to eviscerate their opponents. Darius Slayton and Saquon Barkley slot in as the must-starts from the Giants side. In the probably start section, we're looking at Daniel Jones, still a good quarterback. Even in poor performance last week, he still put up 24 fantasy points. He has that rushing upside. He has the ability to run in with his legs. He has a lot of the traits we like for fantasy, so he does make a probably start. And in desperation, you could probably throw in Michael Gallup. He's been struggling since his return from injury. He hasn't found a consistent rhythm in this offense, and I think the running game, Pollard is more involved in the passing game than him. I think he's a fourth option when it comes to passing behind CD, Pollard, Schultz. But, in a desperation situation, he is still technically their deep threat as a not trade for Brandon Cooks. So you can always try to bank on a 40, 50-yard TD for him to get like a solid 10-point floor. So that's going to wrap up our matchup of the week. As we were going to do, go check out Sleeper. I have 14 video player highlights that will be posted this week where we dive down into very, very specific stats around each player, look at their projections, look at their rankings, how they're going to perform this week, and my recommendation where they should slot into their roster. So I will absolutely plug at Sleeper HQ on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube. The videos will definitely post on YouTube and hopefully on TikTok and Instagram as well. And obviously, if you go over to the Sleeper app and go over to videos, you'll find them posted there as well. So the players I'm highlighting this week are going to be Ryan Robinson and Antonio Gibson from the Commanders, Allen Robinson and Tyler Higbee from the Rams, Cortland Sutton and Greg Dulcich from the Broncos, Christian Kirk from the Jags, DJ Moore and Deonta Foreman from the Panthers, Gus Edwards from the Ravens, Tyler Lockett from the Seahawks, Rondale Moore, James Conner from the Cardinals, and finally, and last but certainly not least, Keenan Allen from the Chargers. So I know this has been a long episode, but let's wrap it up with one really quick parting thought.
There's only one thing that I'm not clear about.
Actually, there is one thing.
What other thing?
Parting thought on the week is what is going on with the running backs. We had, some interesting drops a couple weeks ago when the Cardinals cut Benjamin. Apparently that was over playing time. But then this past week, Broncos dropped Melvin Gordon, who is their best running back, and then the Rams dropped Darrell Henderson, who is also their most productive running back on the week. What's going on with that? This is going to open up the pathway for kind of dumpster diving for running backs that are going to carry you to a championship. Think of a Rashad Penny-esque type championship run that he had last season. So it's going to be very interesting. Monitor the waiver wires. Look at Kyron Williams. Look at Latavius Murray. I'm not sure what the goal of these teams are. Granted, these are teams that are projected right now to miss the playoffs and don't have the greatest offensive efficiency. They're both bottom 4 in total offensive points put up on the board, but it'll be interesting to see which one of these undrafted players that you can go searching for, pick up off the waiver wire, and they're going to turn into these gems for the last few weeks. So, keep an eye on the Broncos, on the Rams, on any team that's dropping running backs and just has a very severe lack of fantasy assets because they gotta find yards somehow. All right, they gotta find the yards somehow, and yards turn into fantasy points. Sometimes you just gotta get fantasy points the dirty way, just racking up yards on the ground with some no-name running back like Rashad Penny. All right, guys, have a wonderful Thanksgiving. Take care. Eat tons of turkey. Enjoy all the football, and I'll see you back to recap this insane slate of games next Tuesday.